Welcome back to the Context Coaching Podcast. We are joined today by Mike Sparrer, Athletic Director at Leland High School in San Jose. Coach, thanks for taking the time to be with us today.
Happy to be here. Appreciate it.
I guess technically you're in Almaden, though, right? What's the real city?
It's actually San Jose, but
Okay.
San Jose has a lot of little communities. So we're in Almaden. Yeah,
Okay.
South San Jose.
All right. Perfect. Love it. All right. Why don't you take us through your background? Help us ground the audience. How'd you get here, man? I know you've been doing it a long time. It's a process like
Yeah.
the first coaching job. How'd you become an AD? Ground us.
Yep. Yeah. Been at Leland. This is my 17th year at Leland. Been the baseball coach that entire time. And then athletic director for about the last 10 years. Got my start in coaching literally right out of college. Went to Pioneer High School, graduated from Pioneer. Went down to Fresno State for 5 years, came back and was hired on at 22 years old as a English teacher, journalism, baseball. By year two, it was leadership. On top of that, it was football. It was all that. But I did 2 years as a varsity assistant, just green as green could be at Pioneer, just trying to figure it all out. Then did 2 years as the JV coach there. At that time, I moved over to Los Gatos High School, where I was the JV coach for a year, and then was arguably on one of the best baseball coaching staffs that you could be on at Los Gatos then for 3 years. Brad Sanfilippo, who's now the head coach at San Jose State, was our head coach, but had just San Francisco State coach Tony Schifano. He's currently at San Francisco State. He was on that staff. Nico Flores was our pitching coach who'd been in baseball for years. Jason Drew. It was a who's who. And you look at where those guys have gone now, you talk about coaching trees. Brad's coaching tree is pretty impressive if you just include those guys. I mean, it's impressive. Anyway, fortunate enough to be on a staff that won a CCS championship there. And I think in that year we had 11 guys on that team that played college baseball in some capacity at some point in their career, a couple that played professionally. It used to a pretty high standard. The Leland job opened up and I interviewed for it and didn't get it the first crack at it. And they hired a guy who had a couple of years experience at another school in the area. They had a dismal year and the job opened back up. And by that point I was hired on not just to coach the baseball team, but also as an English teacher here. So that was my in on coaching. So I think my main point there is if the more coaches are on campus, and I know you'll agree with this, if you're on campus, not only does it make you a better coach, makes you a better teacher, but if you've got a job, if you're in education, you got a job that you think you want, that's the in. They didn't really have a choice in the matter. They had to hire me. But before all of that, I did want to mention, I grew up on high school football sidelines. My dad covered high school baseball, high school football, high school basketball for 50 years. We lost him about 3 years ago, but he was my introduction to high school sports. And so many things that he did as a newspaper guy, I do as an athletic director, down to little things like if we write something up that we put kids' names in, I try to get every kid's name that had anything to do with anything related to that game, that event was a big thing for him. Fast forwarding 17 years here at Leland, we've been fortunate enough to have some really good players. We've won a couple section championships, had some kids that have played, quite a few kids that have played college baseball, a lot of kids that have played professionally, kids that if you're coaching long enough, you get to a point where they graduate from college, they start to get married, they start to have babies. And if you've made that impact on those kids, you're one of their calls that they make and I just got a call a couple of days ago from a kid that played for me for 4 years, played baseball at University of Kansas, played for the Colorado Rockies, stopped playing baseball. He's just a kid now. He's just a person doing the banking thing, whatever. They're having a baby. He thought enough of our relationship to call me. And those are the things that as you take away from, again, when you're in this long enough, that's what you take away from these kids.
1,000%. And I actually just got off a call
Yep.
this one with one of my former students who I haven't talked to in a few years. Wasn't even one of my athletes, but just a kid.
Mhm.
And saw a post on Facebook, reached out. I was like, hey, I haven't talked to you in a while. Why don't you find a time? Let's connect. It's great to catch up. I think you're right. The relational piece that we don't necessarily understand early career as
Yeah.
we get more wisdom, we realize that's where it needs to be. Let me ask this
Yeah.
twofold. So when you became, I guess there's three kind of points of entry that I want to point out, right? Your first 22 years old English teacher, same deal. I was 23 when I got my first coaching job. I was teaching English, right? Same deal. But what did you realize right away that you needed to figure out, both as the JV coach, as the assistant in the sub varsity realm? And then when you took over for the first time as the head coach at Leland, you had these
Yeah.
mentors, you got the coaching tree, you got all the answers. And it's like,
Yeah. Yeah.
no, you don't, Mike.
Nope. Yeah. I'll tell you, the first thing is that the humility of to take your words, thinking you have all the answers. I was an assistant and JV coach under a guy Jake Hernandez, who's still at Pioneer now, who would actually be a great guy for you to have on this podcast as well. But write that down. Sadly, tragically, he just lost his wife at a very young age to cancer. But once things settled down a little bit for him, he'd be a great guy for you to have on here. But Jake and he was 23, 24, I was 22. And we took over and we didn't know anything. We didn't know a damn thing about what we were doing. And so figuring that out, but that humility of knowing, I think the biggest thing for me has been knowing you don't have all the answers. But I think the biggest piece of growth is knowing you don't need them all. And I think that's where early in your career, I can remember going to every coaching clinic that I could ever possibly attend and trying to literally write down every word that every single person said in that room. And then obviously your knowledge base grows as the years go on, and you don't necessarily have to take every word, but going in knowing you don't have to have all the answers. It's okay in the classroom, on the field, to say, hey, you know what, guys? This is how we've run our bunt coverage for years. And you bring up a good question. What do you guys think? How do we tweak this to make this work for this year's team? But yeah, I had all the answers. I knew how to run the program better than Jake did. I knew how to do all the stuff that he wasn't doing. And you get to your first opportunity as a head coach. And I'll tell you, the first thing is you're only as good in almost every single sport. You're only as good as your coaching staff. And the more that coaching staff evolves and you build guys that have allegiance and loyalty to you and vice versa, and letting, it's cliche, you hear it all the time, but letting them coach, giving them meaningful responsibility that they're going to own a portion of whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish. And that's one of my big takeaways. Is it took me a while. I had to work through a few people here and there, but I say all the time now, even as an athletic director, like, I want somebody I can sit down and have a beer with or have a meal with and maybe not even talk about baseball or whatever sport they coach, just interact with and be able to laugh with and enjoy their company. That to me is way more valuable than the greatest X's and O's tactician that might be out there. But yeah, it's that humility piece that I think is so important. Don't be afraid to say you don't know. It's not the end of the world.
Absolutely. And I think, again, when you're 22, teaching English, coaching, it's hard to do that, right? And as you get older,
Yeah.
you realize you're not infallible, and it's okay to own that. And it's good leadership for the kids to show them somebody saying, I don't know, but let me go find out. What about when you came to AD? Same question. What did you realize right away that you needed to figure out after years of watching the job be done, thinking, hey, I can do that. I'm ready. Let's go.
I knew all the answers. I was perfect when I took over. The AD job in the 10 years that I've been doing it, I don't know if there certainly has over the years, but there's such an evolution in the job. From when I took over, it was what you don't know. And so sometimes those things don't fall on your plate. And then as they come up and you start to take ownership of whatever that may be. I was just having a conversation before I jumped on here with a coach. You get caught up in some of the day-to-day stuff, and it's where's the big picture stuff? Where's the publicity of the athletic department? But anyway, back to your question. I had no idea how much dealing with coaches and managing adults was going to be a challenge. Dealing with kids is easy. And I have the best relationship I could possibly have with our activities director. She is a very close personal friend. She will be for forever, even when we both leave Leland. But I tell her all the time, like, you think your job is hard, try managing 65 adults who don't really work for you. They do, but they don't. You're not the one paying their mortgage with their salary. You're paying them pennies for what they're doing. And managing people is there's nothing harder than that in high school sports. Just in sports in general, just getting people to follow. And then you might have 3 different volleyball coaches in 3 consecutive years, and it's going back to the basics, front loading everything, starting over every year to try to help them figure out how to navigate all the things that come into this. And you have parents nowadays who are so quick to point out the fallacies, that the things that coaches do wrong, they jump on it immediately. Instead of, hey, how can I help remedy this situation? It's, let's fire this guy. Let's get rid of her, that kind of thing. The coaching and AD path are 2 incredibly similar journeys, because you do have, and I'll tell you, the people think, oh, that must be coaching and being an athlete. When you're coaching in your season as an athletic director, you're a terrible athletic director. Let's just call it what it is. There are things that get put on the back burner because at 2:30, 3 o'clock every day, you're running out the door. Earlier in the day, you're putting together a practice plan. You're doing those types of things. I'm probably not as good a coach as I was when I was not an AD, and I'm probably not as good an AD as I could be if I wasn't a coach.
10,000%.
That's just the reality. But I wouldn't do this without doing that, and vice versa. Being a coach is really at the core of this, right? Like, you have ADs that no longer coach or who haven't done much coaching. I think they lack a perspective that somebody who's spent a lot of time on the sidelines and the dugout has, that you don't get by watching. You got to be on the front lines to see the impact.
I think what you said is part of the reason I've been trying to extract myself from coaching, because I'm the worst soccer AD on the planet, because it's during basketball season. And I wish I could be there. I try, and it's just my soccer coaches got to feel like they're neglected. And I feel you're right.
I get questions from kids. Why don't we see you at lacrosse games? Like, dude, because I'm on the other side of town coaching a baseball game at Westmont.
Yeah.
Now I decided to throw this completely out of whack, and I'm actually taking the year off of coaching because I have an almost 2-year-old daughter at home. So I fill the void of coaching with a 2-year-old daughter who now I'm rushing out the door, not to get to practice, but to get home to spend as much time as I possibly can with her. But I will say this, just in the first month of taking a year off of coaching, for now it's a year. We'll see where we are at the end of this year, but I'm a better, more prepared athletic director.
1,000%. And let's stay with athletic director, and then we'll go back to baseball. For a second. You talked about managing adults, and I think clearly that's one of the main things we do. How do you navigate the balance? And this question's coming from a conversation that slowed me down getting on the show as I was talking to one of my coaches, where I'm telling him, dude, I love you. I want you to advocate for your program, and you got to let me do X, Y, and Z, or you're actually undermining yourself. So how do you balance your job as the baseball coach is to advocate for baseball at an elite level. Your job as the AD is to ensure equity. Balance that in your relationships with the head coaches to help them understand, yeah, you're important, but so are these other teams. And yes, you're the most important in your mind, but you're not in our mind. You're 1 of 25, right? Talk a little bit about that challenge and how you've changed over the years, how you've shifted, what successes you found, what failures you found.
I'll start with a quick sort of anecdote. Literally last night, there was a little confusion over who was supposed to be in our main gym, who was supposed to be in our small gym. And sometimes you make these decisions based on the size of your program. And in this case, it was volleyball with his 12 kids wants to practice in the large gym, where badminton with its 60 kids is already holding practice. And it just, you have to do a little damage control. And hey, you know what? I understand that you want the main court, and so do they, and blah, blah, blah. But anyway, I think communication is at the forefront. Like you have to, I think one of the things that I've implemented is I talk to every one of our coaches on the phone. I'm a phone guy. I'm a pick up the phone and call you. If it's a quick little thing, it's a text or an email. But generally speaking, I try to talk to every one of our coaches at least once a week, in person, on the phone, check in with them. How's your season going? What are your needs? What are your challenges? I have to tie in kind of the baseball coaching world to this. I think in coaching, there's absolutes. Like there's certain things that are not going to be up for debate. And then there's room for your input and your own flair on things. And the same is true, I think, in working with coaches. Like there's going to be some absolutes. And if I can communicate, part of the confusion last night with the gym is on me. Like clearly that wasn't communicated clearly enough to everyone involved. And the last thing we want is confusion when it comes to stuff like that. So having some level of absolutes, having that communication of, hey, this is how we're gonna work uniform distribution. This is how we're gonna work purchasing and prioritizing who needs new uniforms and when. All those types of things, I think, comes down to laying that out. And I think that only happens with time. If I went to a brand new school tomorrow, it would take me time to figure out how that works on that site. What we do here is different from what you do there, and your budgets are different. Your allocation of funds is different. And the longer you have somebody with you as a coach the more you develop that relationship, and then that advocating for their sport can be more conversational rather than controversial. It's hey, you know what? We've been after this for a couple of years. You and I have talked about this. We need another example. We have our poor track and field kids. We have high jump pads that they move from a storage shed out to the track and back every day. And it's a huge undertaking every single day that they do it. The shed the kind of the movable shed that a lot of us have over our pole vault pits, they make something similar for the high jump pads. It's $30,000-$40,000 from installation to building it to all that stuff. Our track coach has been, and he's been with us forever, but he's been incrementally each year a little more pushy on, hey, this is something that we really need to emphasize. So again, I think it's communication, and it's giving people, hey, these are the 2 or 3 things that we're not going to even debate. This is how it's going to go. And then letting them have some input. We do every year in the spring, we do a focus group's not the right way to put it, but we do a coach appreciation / feedback idea generation meeting. And we rent out the back room of a pizza restaurant down the street. And our Booster Club buys dinner for as many coaches that show up. And that's their opportunity. I don't say a ton in that meeting. I want to hear from them. What needs do you see? What do you guys want to do to improve this? And we do some focus group survey stuff with our parent communities too, to get similar feedback. I'll tell you, that's always a fun one, is getting that feedback to listen to what moms and dads have to say. You've got to have some thick skin when you do that one.
Yeah. And if we as coaches or athletic directors, our entire life is about feedback loops, how do we receive that in the spirit it is intended, which is
Right.
These are areas of growth from the lens of the receiver, right? It's got to lead by example there. What would you say is the best thing you've gotten out of that had an impactful, let's call it, change on your decision making, or areas that you then implemented based on those surveys?
So one of them, and I don't know if this is a great example, but we had been all over the map senior recognition night. If you had coaches and parents who were super organized and driven, you get a football or a basketball team that's doing these full-size, full-color banners of kids and flowers and this and that, and it was a whole deal. And then you had sports that quite literally were doing almost nothing. And so we took some of that feedback and we said, okay, we need to streamline this process across the board for all of our sports so that every one of our seniors is walking away with and obviously your facility and the sport and the time of year, all of that kind of plays a role in this. But we basically have a framework for what our senior nights look like. And that came directly from some of the parents. I honestly, I think it was some tennis parents who were like, hey, you got football and soccer who's doing XYZ, and our coach is doing nothing. And I'll tell you, the best thing about those surveys is that it then becomes to your point, it's the people that are receiving the service. It's something I can take to a coach and say, this isn't me saying this. This is coming directly from your parents. And you definitely have to have a little bit of, you definitely thick skin, but you also have to have a little bit of a perspective on sometimes and every year this happens, you get a handful of people and that's just their opportunity to vent. And you have to, just take it as what it is. But that came directly from that feedback that we got from parents.
I just listening to you there, right? A senior night template, because you're right. Everybody's deal with it is different. Even myself,
Yeah.
my assistant coach is like champion event planner. And so she's, hey, what are we doing for senior night? I'm like, hey, that's your department. I don't deal with that.
Yeah.
And so it's, if she wasn't there to help me with that, it would be a debacle. So even now you have this template that maybe you can make available that now makes it easier for people like me that aren't
Yeah.
in to make it better.
Yeah. And it's oftentimes it's so driven by parents too. Like you get a group of parents, maybe you've got 6 or 8 seniors on a basketball team. So it's 50, 60, 70% of your roster. And they blow it out of the water. They do an amazing job. And the junior and sophomore parents are sitting there going, look at this. They leave. And the coach really didn't have a hand in any of it. And now you turn around the next year and the junior parents are like, great. All right. Our kids are seniors. What are we doing? And the coach is, I don't know.
That was
So
my
we've
problem.
literally,
Yep.
yeah, we've literally stolen per se from other programs. And we're like, okay, you guys do the banners. The banners are easy. Let's put the banners up. And we've even evolved from there. We try to get the banners up in early in the season. Let's put them out there. Hey, these are our seniors. We were down at Arroyo Grande High School for a water polo match, CI NorCal water polo match a couple of years ago. And they had their banners up for their entire swim team already. And it was November, December. So yeah, that's having that process, and it helps new coaches to be for sure.
Yeah, no, I love that. Okay, so we sit on ADAC together, and I'm curious in regards to organizations that, as a baseball coach, you have used over the years
Mm-hmm.
to get better, right? And
Yep.
our CSADA or CCSADA,
Yep.
these athletic director associations that you and I are part of, how would you advise your coaches, just in a snapshot of, look, I know I have some answers. I got a great coaching staff, but we don't have it all. And here's some resources that I'd invite you to look into after 17 years doing this.
Yep. Number one, obviously I'm privy to the baseball world, but most of our sports have a national coaches organization. And in case of the baseball, it's ABCA, and they do a conference every year. I've never gone to the actual conference, but I sign up and pay for it every year because with that comes all the videos that they publish from all the different speakers they have at those conferences. Then down to most of them there's a state association, and in some cases there's a local section or county or whatever. So I'm a member of all of those. And sometimes it gives you an opportunity also to nominate your players for recognition. And in some cases, even your assistant coaches for recognition. And then the other one and I use this constantly, and I honestly, this is probably one of my biggest frustrations with even coaches on my own baseball staff, but even other coaches of other sports here. Coaches Insider is, to me, I think it's $100 a year, and there are, I don't know, 15 different sports. And again, in the case of baseball, there are thousands of hours of video on there. And I think as you get into coaching more, you move away from some of the big picture stuff, and you start to tinker and tweak with kind of the little things, stuff that we talk to our kids about all the time. Hey, do the little things, do the little things. I have picked up little things from Coaches Insider on a Tuesday in April, eating lunch. Hey, I'm going to watch this bunting video from the University of Louisville. And hey, I like that. We're going to implement that. We go out literally that afternoon to do it. And I don't understand why more coaches don't do that. And maybe they do in other places, but for some reason here that hasn't taken off. But yeah, we use that all the time. In fact, the guy that's taken over baseball for me this year, he's been with me for 5 or 6 years. He and I'll sit and watch videos, and it's like having that coaches conference, coaches convention right here in your office on your laptop.
No, I love that.
But those are great.
Let me go into your baseball deal, and then I'm going to spin back to the AD role, right? So When it comes to culture, is such a buzzword, but when it just comes to things that each of us do that are unique to our
Yeah.
personality, right, and our programs, I'm always curious how transferable approaches that have an impact on culture can be shared, right? So, what would you
Hmm.
say is the best thing you do in your program that were you to start coaching football tomorrow, you would do that as well because of the impact that it has? Or
Yeah.
when you get back or you start coaching your daughter's little league team, right? These things
Yeah.
that are like,
Right.
this thing matters and I want everybody else to know about it because of the way in which it impacts the experience of kids and the culture and the team building, whatever it happens to be. But I want to know that for baseball for you. And
Yep.
then I want to know as the AD, similarly, departmentally, or even something you've seen one of your other coaches do that you've stolen because of how impactful it was.
No. I don't know if this applies necessarily to a single team structure, but in the case of baseball with two teams and in some years, three levels, one of the things that we've done for almost the entire time I've been here, we do all of our positional work together as an entire program. And it's primarily we want to do as much as humanly possible. We want to have consistent vocabulary. We want to have consistent instruction into, if we call it this, we want everybody in the program to call it this. We have, so we'll get all of our infielders and it'll be all of the infielders together. We'll do all the same drill work. And times we even do some of the team element together where we'll have a varsity, a ones and twos group of varsity, and we'll have a JV group. And the varsity ones will take a rep, the varsity twos will take a rep, and then the JV. And the benefit is obvious from a skill standpoint for the younger kids. That one, they're getting varsity level instruction, they're seeing the varsity level players. But the unintended consequence was, and this doesn't happen every single year, but in more years than not, the varsity guys take on a mentor role. And I think from a culture standpoint, the more you get a senior who will say knows the name of a freshman on the JV team or freshman team, walking through the hall during the school day and says, "Hey, what's up, Tony?" I've had kids come, and it's a cycle, right? So now as those kids get to be juniors and seniors, they remember the way that the upperclassmen treated them, and it becomes less of a, "Hey, get out of my way, I'm getting in the cage," to, "Hey, Tony, how much longer are you going to be in there? I'm gonna step in when you're done." It's really helped our culture from that perspective. And then now I had a thought and I lost it, but you had a question
Second piece,
about,
so that's your baseball. But now
yeah,
overseeing all your other programs, it's, hey, you
right,
know what? My
right,
water polo coach does this, and that's why they're tight, and I'm stealing that.
yeah. So that one is, I might have to come back to you on that one. That one,
No worries.
I had a second thing I was going to share with you, and now it just completely
It's all
lost.
good. We'll come back to that.
Come back to that.
Let's do it as the AD, right? So you
Okay.
took over, you're 10 years in, you're
Yep.
obviously a lifelong learner trying to learn certain things and shift certain things. What would you say the best thing you do in the athletic department that you have found has sustained value that you would offer to the rest of us in regards to, yo, this is super important. If I took the job at Pioneer tomorrow,
Yeah.
regardless of the school site, this is going down.
Yeah. Um, we've done now two things. One is we've instituted, and I know Los Gatos does this, I stole it from them, but every year we do in January, we do like a recruitment night kind of thing for the whole school. And so we've taken that model and implemented it in late May as a incoming eighth grade athletic information night. And we have every one of our coaches at a table surrounding the back wall of the gym. We bring the coaches, we bring athletes, and we talk to those kids that are coming to Leland. It's their opportunity to get general information, and then it's their opportunity to get sports specific information. And then we have a couple of current Leland students speak. We had a Leland grad who was playing college softball come, and she spoke to the group, and the feedback on that's been outstanding. There's apprehension coming in as an incoming freshman, and to have some level of information, some familiarity with with what's going on at the high school before they get there is huge. And then the second thing that we've done is we've started seasonal. Everybody has their parent meetings. Everybody has coaches meetings. We have a tutorial period, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. It's like a 40+ minute kind of gap in their schedule. They have to be in a classroom. It's a structured teaching time, but it's not like they go to different classes based on needs. They can make up anyway. Bottom line, we started doing every season. We'll do all of those kids that are in the winter season come to the gym during that tutorial period, and I share with them what the expectations are of the athlete. When you have an early release, how do we expect you to deal with that? When you're any number of things that we cover in that time period, and going straight to the kid rather than giving the information to the coach or the parent and expecting them to pass it along has been a big change.
I can only imagine. That's great. Those are the things we struggle with, right? It's good. You signed the handbook. Parents signed the handbook. You were told,
I didn't read it.
Yeah, I love that. All right, let's do this.
Yeah.
You were the baseball coach for, it sounds like, 7 years before you became the AD. And then
here at Leland. Yes, correct.
And then as the AD, right, now you're going around watching practices, you're watching games, you're dealing with stuff that comes back and forth. What have you learned watching other teams that you've been able to appropriate to make you a better baseball coach? And I'm asking this, Mike, because I'm so bullish on the multi-sport athlete, and the modern youth sports industrial complex is destroying it, that I just want our listeners to understand you don't have to subscribe to that model. There's so much value that comes by getting them involved in other sports.
Yeah. So I this is going to be kind of a silly answer, but I have picked up, I watch our soccer teams and I watch our basketball teams, and I think I'm going to call it an informal environment. But when I say that, I love the idea of playing music while kids are, even during, a lot of us do it pregame. We do it during our in and out. We do it here and there. I like it while we're stretching, while we're warming up, and I think that giving another thing that we've started doing, and I picked this up from probably the first place I saw it was years ago with Gary Cunningham when he was at Bellarmine. Every kid has body functions differently. Everybody's got a little bit of a greater need to stretch this or to work this out or whatever. So I have an unstructured kind of practice, like a 15-minute period at the start of a practice day where you stretch what you think you need to stretch. We don't do the stand in line, circle in center field. Everybody does this stretch. Then we do this. Then we do that. I tell them, hey, you have a feel. We're going to front load some basic stretching, mobility kind of stuff that we think is important. But at the end of the day, if you have tight hamstrings, you spend more time on your hamstrings. If you have shoulder issues or you have elbow, if you're seeing a physical therapist, which a lot of our kids nowadays are under the care of any number of doctors, especially at Leland, and if you need that, if you have that need, but I think I used to feel like everything had to be so perfect and formal. And I've watched our girls soccer program and our girls water polo programs have both had tremendous success. They're in NorCal just about every year. And watching the sort of informality, is that a word? The informal nature of their preparation for practice I think is a great takeaway. I really like that. And it's probably something that's way overlooked by people, but I found that it has a huge impact.
Well, I love that because it leads into my next question to a certain degree, which is just simple. It's like, how's your approach changed over the years, both as a coach and an athletic administrator, right? Because if you're 25 years into this and you've got 25 years of experience, or you've got 1 year of experience 25 times, right? We want the second one, not the first one. And you only get that by being curious and by trying different things. And we all have whatever we've tried to figure out. I don't even do stretching and warm-ups anymore. It's like, I tell them, I'm like, we're starting at this time. You're responsible to be ready. Y'all do your thing.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
I landed there at some point, but that's irrelevant. But it's good perspective on what best serves the group that you are currently working with. And I think often we get in our formula And it's like, how
Yes.
do you push the boundaries on that? So how's your approach changed both as an AD and as a coach over the years?
I think first and foremost, it's that willingness to not have all the answers right at the tip of my finger. That's number one. I do my very best, and I'm not perfect at it. My wife will tell you that, but I do my best to listen whether it's a parent with a concern or it's an athlete with a concern. I try my best to listen and let them express whatever it is that. And it might be that early in my career, hey, this is how we're going to run this butt coverage, and I don't care what you think. You do it the way I tell you to. Now I'm much different. I'm very much more. I've probably gone from the dictatorial coach to more of a player's coach from the perspective that, hey, I'm going to listen. You got in trouble on campus, something happened in a classroom. You got here's a great example. You got ejected from you got a red card. You got double T. You got thrown out of a game. Before I pass any judgment on anything related to that, my very first question is, tell me your perspective of what took place. And I think we get so caught up in reading the report from the CCS office and the official, which I don't know about you, but I've never read one where the official wasn't completely exonerated and innocent in the entirety of the situation. Every report you read. And so you do want to give the kids this, at least a feel like, hey, I empathize with what you're experiencing. I want to hear from you. I want to hear what your take is on what happened. And then we'll share, and then we'll get to where we need to go. But listening to assistant coaches, listening to the head coach of the girls basketball team who has this concern or whatever the case may be, but giving them that voice.
No, I like that. It's one of these things where if you want to use that situation of things that go down with the refs, it's like at the end of the day, they're right, you're wrong, but we got to at
Yeah,
least help you feel heard because
exactly.
you might be right, but at the end of the day, you're not.
And that's the hierarchy of life, right? Like there are periods of times where your boss says 20 years from now, your boss says it's going to be this way. You may have a great perspective on how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have to accept that. And so that's hard. That's hard for kids. That's a challenge. It's certainly a learning thing for them.
All right, I'm going to ask two more questions. The first
Yeah.
one is my steal from Coaching for Leaders. It's what have you most recently changed your mind on? And it doesn't have to be about coaching. I use this especially as a parent with a young child. We're in a polarized environment where nobody can ever be wrong. And how do we promote growth mindset? I used to believe this. Now I'm over here. And here's why I'm over here now. That's what I'm looking for. Whatever thing you can think about where you've made that shift.
To take from the question, what have you learned throughout your coaching journey? So we all know that we learn more from our losses, or we remember our losses more than we do our wins. And I've been fortunate enough. I've coached in quite a few section semifinals and finals, and been lucky enough to win a couple, but we lost one. And to the day I die, I will take responsibility for the fact that we lost. It was a tie game late in the game, and with 2 outs, runners at first and third, and we tried to pick over to first base, threw the ball down the right field line, and what ultimately was the winning run score from third. And my initial response was, and I think this is what it evolved into, is we've talked about this before. We've worked on this before. Why don't you know this? And I think you find that Chloe's, my daughter, is probably a little bit too young for me to have ventured into that with her, even in a marriage or a relationship that, hey, we've talked about this, we've gone over this, but specifically with my baseball guys, and I think this applies in the classroom as well, like even with coaches, just because you have full and complete and total understanding of this forward and backward and forward doesn't mean they do. And so in this instance, we've made some adjustments to our coaching to cover things on a more, I was guilty of, hey, we worked on this in February. Why don't you know it in May? And that even to hear that, it sounds ludicrous now, but you get so caught up in throughout the season, and you're taking what didn't work in previous games, and you're you're addressing it and the practices that follow. And maybe that scenario doesn't come up for the entire season until I've said to my kids all the time, like, bunt coverages, first and thirds, the things that we don't really love to do. It's not that fun. Those practices are a mental and a physical challenge. Yeah, that may not be a big deal if it costs us a game in April, but you better believe when we get into May and late May and into those section semifinals and finals, when teams bunt, teams do a little bit more of that stuff, you damn well better be able to defend it, or that could be the difference. And in this case, it was. And I take complete and full response. And I've told the kid who I'd given a sign, hey, I don't care if he steals right field. Let him. He can run all over the outfield for all I care. We're going to hold the ball in the mound, and that kid at third base is going to stand right there. And poor kid picked over, even though he got the sign to not do it, or at least I thought he did. And obviously that didn't resonate with him, and he thought he was doing the right thing, and so on. Anyway, but yeah, the whole notion of,
if your kid's listening to this, however long ago that was, you and I both know really well. Players win, coaches lose. Deal with it.
100%, 100%. And to his credit, that kid has come back, and we've talked about it. And he's like one of the best kids, just human being wise, that I've ever coached, and humble. And he took on that day, and probably still to this day, he thinks he wears that. And I've told him, you don't, but
that's on us.
That's
on us.
Yeah, 100%, 100%.
All right, last question.
Yes, sir.
That is a combo platter. In the world of turbo technological advancement, what's the best tool you have adopted that has made your job easier, better, more efficient, either as a coach or an AD?
So we haven't done enough with it, but as a coach, it's some of this. God, there's a few different versions of this, but I always laugh at coaches who will watch, baseball. It's about fast movements as a hitter, as a pitcher, even as an infielder, outfielder. But I've always, and I guess maybe I've just never been this guy, but the guy who can watch a kid take two swings and say he knows up and backward and forward what adjustment that kid needs to make. And I'm convinced half the time they're making it up. And I can remember an interview I heard with a pitching guy, Tom House. And Tom House talked about, for years and years and years, they talked about how as a pitcher, you're going to as you start to move forward in the pitching motion, you're bringing your glove to your chest. And that's pulling your body through. And he said, and then we got cameras that could actually slow down enough to where we could see what was happening. And it turns out it's just the opposite, that your chest is moving to your body. And I'm doing a really poor job of explaining it, but you get the gist. And so the more video analysis and the more we're embracing these technological advancements, even at our level, we've implemented some of the huddle sideline stuff with football, like the huddle assist stuff with statistical breakdown. I got football coaches who literally have iPads on the sidelines that are showing kids in real time what the alignment of the opposing team is, or something maybe that they're doing. But yeah, these swing aids that you can attach to a bat and you can get immediate feedback. And I wasn't so sure I was sold on it until we had a kid who was being scouted by some of these big league organizations, and the Seattle Mariners scout came out and he put a sensor on the end of our kid's bat, and he said, all right, I want you to hit for about 15 minutes. And he set up his iPad, and he literally stood there, and we just talked for 15 minutes while this kid hit. He almost didn't care what he saw with his own two eyes, because he was going to rely on what the technology told him. And I think if you're not, there's cost-effective ways to do it. You don't have to spend $100,000 on the Rapsodo and all that kind of stuff in the baseball world, or our district has fought us a little bit, not a little bit, a lot. I don't know why, but they have the reasons on the NFHS cameras in our stadium and our gym. So we've made it work. We've implemented some of the VO stuff for soccer and the huddle assist stuff for soccer and some of these other sports, but using that stuff because kids are so visually, they learn what these visually, they don't, you tell them they did something, you're wasting your time. But if you show them, or even better yet, you teach them to the point where they can identify what they need to do, what they need to adjust, that's huge. So yeah, I think that embracing that technology and not, and I shouldn't call them older coaches because I'm in that fraternity now, but I have experienced coaches who do almost are very resistant to the tech. Let's put it that way. They're very resistant to the technology, and that's a constant. Showing them the benefit, I think, is the key piece.
Yeah, and I'll echo that. I took the Huddle sideline package this year from the football team in basketball season. I set it up in the gym during practice so I
Yeah,
could give like real time video. Hey, come off here. Here's the rep. I don't talk about it. Look at what you did. And it's hell. Why didn't I think about this earlier? And
yeah. In our case, it's the end zone camera. There's not a sport that's harder to film than baseball
Mhm.
because it's such a large area. And even those cameras that you're hanging at the back of a backstop,
Mhm.
it's not getting everything.
Mhm.
You put one of those end zone cameras in center field, now all of a sudden you've got the entire field in your vision.
Dude, I love
Um,
that. I haven't even thought about that. That's great.
yeah. So we've put it up. We've only toyed with it a little bit. We haven't used it on a rate. It takes a lot, I was going to set those up, but we've played with it a little bit, and it's a unique perspective because as a team, you're looking at, you want to show them, how did we not run that relay properly, or how did we not run that bunt coverage properly? And here it is. See
Yep.
it, watch it.
No, that's
Yeah.
great. I love that because the NFHS cameras, those Pixelots, were marketing this double play where you got one in each deal, but they haven't figured it out yet. So, to those of you that have football programs, that's a hack. I love that. That's such a
Yeah.
good piece of advice, Coach.
Yeah.
Thanks for being here. I appreciate you taking the time. Seeing you in a little while at our next meeting and
Yes, sir.
see what else we can learn.
I love it. Appreciate you having me.